At a number 10 spot, we have the Chislehurst Caves. This large cave in England spans 22 miles of passageways split into 3 distinct sections named Saxon, Druid, and Roman. They all branch out and then end up linking one another soon after. In World War II, many British civilians would use this cave to hide from the bombings, but these caves date way further back than that, because they date all the way in 1250, where there are written reports of mining in these caves. Throughout history, the cave was also used as a cemetery to keep the dead, which is why many people believe it is haunted. People regularly report hearing screams, murmurs, children giggling, and footsteps echoing from deep within the cave. Locals even claim that the reports are from the spirits who passed away in the cave, trying to let the living know of the eternal suffering. At a number 9 spot, we have London fog. On December 4th in 1952, smog began to cover all of London. The smog was present for 5 whole days and ended up leading to the passing of at least 4,000 people. On a regular Thursday afternoon, a high pressure air mass stalled over the Thames River Valley. Suddenly, cold air came in from the west side and the air in London became trapped. The problem worsened by the low temperatures, which caused people living there to burn extra coal in their furnaces to keep warm. The smoke, soot, and sulfur dioxide from the area's industries, along with the stuff from the cars and consumer energy usage, caused heavy smog to smother the whole entire city. By the morning of December 5th, it was visible across hundreds of square miles. It became so thick and dense that by December 7th, there was no sunlight and visibility was only down to 5 yards in many places. Eventually, all transportation came to a halt, but not before the smog caused several train accidents, including a collision between 2 trains near the London Bridge. However, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst effect of the smog was the respiratory distress it caused in humans and animals, including difficulty breathing and a lot of people vomiting. A high number of people in the area, numbering all the way in the thousands, passed away in their sleep that weekend. Now, it's a little crazy to me that all this happened and so many people ended up losing their lives. Hopefully we can learn from this. At number 8 spot, we have Maternity Hospital. This building was constructed at the end of the 18th century on the territory of the hospital for participants in the Patriotic War of 1812 against the French army of Napoleon, and initially it was a general district hospital. It became a maternity hospital in the second half of the 20th century and was closed for reconstruction in 2009. The plan of this 2-story building resembles this Russian letter. The ceilings are more than 5 meters high, and in spite of the fact that the building is totally abandoned, it still has central heating and is rather clean. Bloggers and people passionate about abandoned sites visit it on a regular daily basis. The hospital is situated in the region of Vladimir, which is 186 kilometers to the east of Moscow. At number 7 spot, we have the Knights Templar curse. The Knight Templar was a Christian military order with the purpose to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land during the Crusade period. They had the power and the money. Philip IV from France sought to seize their wealth and power. So in a raid, Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, was arrested along with his Templar comrades, being charged with heresy. Soon after, King Philip pressured Pope Clement V and made him agree to the reasoning. The Pope would issue a bill that made all Christian kings able to seize Templar property, which destroyed the Templar order, and Jacques de Molay was sentenced to death. Jacques, while burning on the stake, said, quote, "France will remember our last moments. We die innocent. And you, O Philip, my king, I pardon you. But my forgiveness is in vain, for your life is condemned at the tribunal of God. Within a year I shall await you also." Only 3 days later, Pope Clement would die in agony, and when he was cremated, the fire burned down the church as well. Then Philip IV died at the end of the year and died in great misery and in great pain. At number 6 spot, we have Scylla. This is a monster feared for her brutality. Scylla is a very interesting ocean creature in Greek mythology. She is usually beside the great whirlpool Cerberus and is a huge danger to those who wish to pass her waters. Out of all creatures in Greek mythology, her destruction ranks the highest, no questions asked. But she wasn't always this horrendous monster. In one depiction, she was a beautiful maiden and the fisherman turned god of the sea, Glaucus, fell in love with her. She wasn't interested at all because of his fishy tail, so he turned to Circe to ask for a potion to change her mind. However, Circe loved him and tried to convince him to forget about Scylla. Not wanting to punish the man she loved, Circe decided Scylla would suffer for her humiliation. Scylla was then transformed into a monster which had 6 serpentine-like heads, as well as the sounds of hounds spouting from her sides. There is no point in trying to escape her, cause you just can't. She is too powerful. All people who try to pass her are warned, quote, "Sail past, do not engage in a fight, as you will simply not win." In the hump of our list, we have real werewolves. You might think of werewolf stories as something only told for fun around the campfire, but that wasn't always the case. People truly believed in the existence of these creatures. In fact, in the 16th and 17th century in Europe, werewolf trials accompanied witch trials. It's even more surprising to note that the amount of people who confessed to being werewolves. Some were likely tortured into confession, but others believed that they were actually real werewolves. The idea that a human could transform into an animal was quite popular, and people thought they could make a deal with the devil in order to gain that power. In the 1500s, a French tailor was convicted of luring in, torturing, and slaying his victims before cooking and having them for dinner. He was also accused of turning into a werewolf to terrorize the town at night. Although there are no exact victim count, he was believed to have taken dozens of lives. The tailor made no attempt to defend himself. Instead, he cursed until his last breath, which he burned at the stake. The court was apparently so shocked by his evil acts that the court burned the documents as well. At number 4 spot, we have the Chernobyl black bird. Just a few days before the infamous Chernobyl nuclear plant disaster, many workers at the plant reported seeing a large, dark, and mutated man with gigantic wings. This humanoid creature was given the name Black Bird of Chernobyl, and despite the fact that it had no head, it had piercing red eyes which would send chills to the spines of anyone caught looking at it. Before the disaster, workers claimed to have been plagued by terrifying dreams and many instances of bad luck. Fast forward to the day of the disaster, and now workers have reported seeing the large black bird-like creature with a 40-foot wingspan flying through the smoke of Chernobyl. Many people believe these creatures to be a bad omen since they are shown around history to appear before tragic events. Now this creature is nowhere to be found in the area, which makes me wonder what was truly haunting them at the famous nuclear plant. At number 3 spot, we have sirens. Originating from Greek mythology, sirens are creatures with enchanting musical voices that lure sailors and unsuspecting people to their doom. They were in fact the daughters of the river god Achilles and a muse. Sometimes they're depicted as something similar to mermaids, but in more classical depictions they had wings. The wings were given to them by Zeus's daughter Persephone after Hades kidnapped her and took her to the underworld. She gave the sirens wings to help locate her, but in the oceans the sirens would sing a song so beautiful that it would lure any kind of man to jump off the boat and swim until the sirens would just pull them down under and drown them. Number 2 spot, with the Nuclevi. The Nuclevi is a creature from the Orkney Islands and is considered a Scottish monster of Scandinavian and Celtic mythology. The Nuclevi enjoys inflicting pain, tainting crops, and driving people from their homes. It appears as a horse with the torso of a man upon his back, standing 9 feet tall with long drapey arms attached to the rider, and it looks as though it had been skinned alive with only the muscles exposed. It was known as the creature of the sea that had come onto land just to wreak havoc. Its breath alone caused crops to wilt and even sicken cattle with diseases. At a number 1 spot, we have the Caves of Death. I mean, the name says it all. But if you happen to be in Scotland and you want to try something daring, then try out the Caves of Death. Archaeologists discovered this not too long ago and found that this was an ancient location used for human sacrifice, execution, and body disposal. Radiocarbon dating found mass of dismembered body parts, including children's heads left on poles in front of the cave's entrance, which were left there over 3,000 years ago. It said they did this because they treated this place as a shrine where they would leave those who passed away, wait for them to decompose, and then collect the bones.
Number 10, Scotland's Ghost Road. If you ever find yourself traveling on the A75 in Dumfries and Galloway, keep an eye out for traffic. Over the past 50 years, this infamous stretch of roadway has been the scene of paranormal events, with scared witnesses describing screams from the passed away, ghostly parades, and even UFO sightings. The most well-known instance took place in 1962, when 2 truck drivers stated that they had witnessed a weird vehicle swerving along the road and wild creatures lunging at their windscreen before everything vanished instantly before their very eyes. Many long-distance truck drivers steer clear of this stretch of the highway entirely because of these ghostly sightings. Number 9, Ghillie Dhu. The Ghillie Dhu, a lone male fairy, lives in the wild birch woodlands of Gairloch and Loch Druin. The Ghillie Dhu, who is covered in leaves and moss, actively avoids interacting with people, yet is known to act angrily towards adults who dare enter his forested home. Ghillie Dhu found a young local girl named Jessie McCrae, who was wandering in the pitch black woods in the late 18th century, calmed her and guided her home. Ghillie Dhu is nonetheless particularly kind to children. Number 8. Devils in the Bins. The Devil and a well-known Scottish general sat down to play cards. The founder of the Royal Scots Greys and the head of the Dalyell family in the 17th century, General Tam Dalyell, made this assertion. It is not a jest. He asserted that the devil came to play cards with him every night while he lived at the House of the Bins, the ancient house of his family. Although the devil typically prevailed, Tam did so one night. The devil threw a marble table at him in a fit of wrath, but he missed, and the table fell into the sergeant's pond outside. Though General Tam's stories were dismissed as pure fancy in his day, when the pond dried up 200 years later, what should be found buried in the mud at the bottom but a marble table? Number 7. The Green Lady of Craith's Castle. Queen Victoria saw a green mist and a childlike apparition hovering in one of the rooms at Craith's Castle in Aberdeenshire before they abruptly vanished into the fireplace. Although the Green Lady's exact identity is unknown, local lore claims that she was a servant girl who became pregnant by the scion of the Burnett family, the castle's owners, and was ended to preserve the family name. Many subsequent visitors to Craith's Castle have also seen the Green Lady and her child. In fact, it is said that during 18th century castle repairs, the skeleton bones of a woman and child were discovered beneath the identical fireplace that they still haunt today. Number 6. The Arthur Seat Coffins. A group of schoolgoers discovered 17 small coffins hidden beneath a few thin stone slabs in a grotto on the northeastern face of Arthur Seat one summer afternoon in 1836. Each coffin contained a little human effigy that had been expertly carved, painted with emotive faces, and dressed in precisely sewed clothing and shoes. The coffins must have been made over an extended period of time because some of these individuals were already decomposing when they were discovered. Nobody knows who made these gruesome statuettes or why they were made, but theories about witchcraft and improvised memorials to Burke and Hare's brutally bloodthirsty victims have also been put out. Number 5. Kelpies. The famed Kelpie's sculpture in Falkirk now stands majestically over M9 highway travelers as 30-meter tall statues. But these mutating demon horses are even more evil than their monument gives them credit for. According to legend, the Kelpie uses a cry eerily similar to a woman's scream to entice unwary prey to the water's edge. The Kelpie lunges and drags its prey to their watery fate as they run for the beach. The only way to escape the Kelpie is to demonstrate your control over it by seizing the reins and ripping the bridle off of its back. Number 4. The Mackenzie Poltergeist. Many terrifying stories have originated from the inhabitants of Greyfriars Kirkyard, not the least of which being the one involving Lord Voldemort, whose real name was taken from a gravestone there. But Sir George Mackenzie, often regarded as Edinburgh's most belligerent poltergeist, is its most notorious inhabitant. He gained the moniker Bloody Mackenzie during the 17th century for cruelly torturing Scottish Covenanters or those who resisted King Charles I's religious reforms and stuck to their Presbyterian beliefs. Since a homeless guy trying to find shelter in 1999 broke into his mausoleum, there have been hundreds of documented instances of individuals walking up to his tomb and mysteriously fainting or getting wounded or bruised. Thus, it seems that Brodie Mackenzie lives on, even after her passing. Number 3. The Jacobites of Culloden. The Scottish warriors fighting for independence were massacred by the British Army on the fields of Culloden on April 16, 1746, putting an end to the harsh and bloody Jacobite Rising and the centuries-long conflict between the two countries. There are rumors that birds won't sing over the swampy area where the Jacobites made their last stand, and that locals occasionally see a ghostly figure dressed in tartan strolling the moor while murmuring the phrase "defeated." Additionally, some claim that they can still hear the clash of swords and the cries of men passing away on the battlefield on the anniversary of the Battle of Culloden. Number 2. Annie's Room. Travel back in time to the 17th century when this little network of buried closes was a lively neighborhood full of colorful characters by visiting the real Mary King's Close attraction. But they have to pass through Annie's Room first before they can climb back up to the surface. The spirit of a young, troubled girl who claimed to be named Annie struck Japanese psychic Aiko Gibo in 1992, when she was at the closing. When Annie started displaying plague symptoms, she said that her mother had left her in the clothes. In order to ease Annie's centuries-long loneliness, Aiko gave her a small doll, and hundreds of other visitors have subsequently left similar small toys in Annie's room. Number 1. Jenny Wee the Iron Teeth. The huge Glasgow necropolis, located in the Gorbals suburb to the south of the city, has almost 50,000 graves on its lush hills. One September evening in 1954, a police officer reacted to complaints that hundreds of kids had gathered at the cemetery, disturbing the place's solemnity. The neighborhood kids insisted that they were out to exact revenge on the Gorbals vampire for the execution of 2 young lads. Jenny Wee the Iron Teeth, a demonic hag who has rumored to have prowled Glasgow Green in the 19th century, taking unwary children into her lair with her metal teeth, was allegedly spotted by several people. Thanks for watching. Those were 10 Scottish urban legends they tried to hide from us. Leave a like and comment if you think we missed anything, and we hope you have a scary day.
Number 10, the Blood Eagle. Have you ever heard of the Blood Eagle? Well, it's a theorized, brutal, ritualistic method of torture that was allegedly practiced by some of the Vikings. It's so gruesome that some scholars even question whether it was even possible to perform on a human body. But a recent study published in Speculum, a journal of medieval studies, has found that the Blood Eagle was in fact anatomically possible and could have been performed with known Viking weapons. Imagine this: victims were typically captured in battle, and their captors would cut and open large flaps of skin and muscle from their living victim's back, and then sever the ribs from the spine and opening out the ribs to the side to form wings. The torturer would then complete the ritual by pulling out the victim's intact lungs and laying them over the extended ribs, and at this point the victim is certainly deceased. It's a gruesome and horrifying thought, but this act was considered as a performative display of social standing and a ritualized execution that included conspicuous mutilation in elite circles of Viking society. While the study couldn't actually confirm whether this ritual was actually practiced, it does suggest that written accounts of the Blood Eagle ritual were describing events that actually happened and were socially significant for leaders celebrating victory over a powerful enemy. It's a gruesome piece of history, I might say, but it's a fascinating look into the brutal practices of some cultures. But I guess the only way to see if this is actually possible is to do it yourself. So, any volunteers? Number 9, a Ragnarok. Imagine a great battle where major figures in Norse mythology like Thor, Odin, and Loki meet their demise, natural disasters that make even the bravest Viking warriors tremble, and a world drowned in water. This event is known as Ragnarok, which is something most Vikings already know about. Here, the gods led by Odin prepare for this event every day by choosing fallen warriors to join them in Valhalla, where they feast and battle against each other as preparation for this ultimate battle. When the fateful day comes, the gathered warriors will march out of Valhalla's doors to face their fate. This event is described as a beginning with 3 years of terrible winters and summers of black sunlight, where people will lose all hope and turn to greed, incest, and civil war. Jormungandr, the world serpent, will lunge out of the ocean, flooding the world and poisoning the skies. Thor will then kill the serpent, but will die from his venom. The waves will set loose Naglfar, which is the nail ship, and Loki will beat at its helm to carry the giants to the final battlefield. The giant wolf Fenrir will break his invisible chains, and the skies will open up, and Surtur the fire giant Jotun will come flaming across the bridge to destroy the gods. Heimdall will then blow on his horn to call the gods to the final battle, and Loki shall face Heimdall and they will slay one another. Surtur will spread fire across the world, then Odin will ride out of the gates of Valhalla to do battle for a last time against this wolf, who was foretold to be the one to bring his end. At last, Fenrir will swallow the sun, but Odin's son Vidar shall stride across the battlefield, bend the jaws of the wolf apart, and stab its heart. The fire of Surtur shall engulf Yggdrasil, and the world will collapse onto itself and be drowned in water as the universe returns to Yungaga. Number 8, the Dragger. Vikings didn't fear much, but when they did, it was from the undead, which just makes sense. More specifically, they feared an undead creature known as the Dragger. These creatures are reanimated corpses, and unlike ghosts, they have a physical body with similar abilities as they possessed in life. According to Norse folklore, the Dragger live in their graves, often guarding treasure buried with them in their burial mound. One of the best known Dragger is Glamour, who is defeated by the hero in the Grettis Saga, otherwise known as Iceland's first sagas. Glamour's death causes much turmoil and fear as people become more aware that he is not resting in peace, and he is instead this creature wreaking wreaking havoc. This causes some people to faint at the sight of him and others to go out of their minds. The way a person becomes a dragger is through not being in a horizontal position after death, and in most cases the corpse is found in an upright or a sitting position. Mean, nasty, or greedy persons are believed to be more likely to become a dragger as well, and as Armin states, most medieval Icelandic ghosts are evil or marginal people. The Vikings believed that even if one person was dead, their body would still move and harm other people as a dragger. And this is how they would go around and hurt anyone on its way. They carried out various precautions to prevent the dragger from wandering around, such as putting straw under the shroud, tying the toes of the dead all together, and using magic words to tie the dead to their coffin. Number 7. The Kraken. The Vikings were accomplished sailors and navigators, but on their voyages, they often encountered things they just could not explain. One thing was the Kraken, which is a sea monster known for its immense size and its habit of attacking ships and devouring sailors. The Kraken is described as a giant tentacle creature that is 10 ships long and has eyes the size of dinner plates. The first reference of the Kraken is found in the 13th century Icelandic work titled Ovar Odr, where a sea monster named Hafgufa is described similarly to the Kraken. Another text of the time, a scientific journal dated around 1250, entitled the Koningsgaskil work, describes the Kraken in great detail. It claims that the Kraken would regurgitate food particles from its mouth into the sea, attracting fish to feed and then scooping them all up in one gulp. But the Kraken is not only known for its unique feeding habits, it is also known for its dangerous nature. It could create whirlpools that would sink ships and lure in sailors who mistook its great size for an island. The most terrifying part of the Kraken legend is the way it attacks ships. The beast would rapidly ascend from the depths to wrap its monstrous tentacles around the ship, pulling it under the waves where it could devour the sailors later. Numerous drawings and etchings still exist showing a Kraken attacking a vessel, and these artworks are a testament to the fear that the Kraken instilled in the hearts of these sailors. While the Kraken may be a mythological creature, the legend surrounding it makes for a thrilling and entertaining read. So the next time you're out at sea, keep an eye out for this giant tentacled sea monster, because you may never know when it might make an appearance. Number 6. The world built off murder. In the ancient Norse mythology, the universe was believed to have emerged from a vast and empty chasm where worlds made of fire and ice were separated by a mysterious being named Ymir. This hermaphroditic creature was the mother and father of the race of Jotuns, which are these chaotic nature spirits that would later become the enemies of the Norse gods. But as fate would have it, another being known as Buri came into existence, and his grandchildren Vili, Ve, and Odin decided to take matters into their own hands and create the world as we know it today. Unlike the Judeo-Christian concept of God creating substance out of nothing, the Norse deities could not do so. So in a bold and daring move, Odin and his brothers decide to murder Ymir and use his body to create the world. They use his blood to form the sea, his bones and teeth to create more rocks and mountains, and his brain to form the clouds. This act of sacrifice gave great power to the three brothers, and they used it to give life and intelligence to human beings. The outlook of the Vikings was heavily influenced by the fact that they lived in a universe that was only made possible through death and sacrifice. They often saw the world as a cruel and unforgiving place, but it was also a reminder of the great power that sacrifice could bring. And this story may be another link as to why we see them as brute savages. But if you were told that the world around you is made up of murder, how would you respond? In the hump of our list, we have the werewolf of Gudbrandsdalen. This Viking story begins with the peaceful village of Gudbrandsdalen, where life is simple and the people are content. Then all of a sudden, one day, strange things begin to happen. Livestock is found brutally killed, and the villagers start to disappear without a single trace. As fear and panic spread throughout the villagers began to suspect that there was a werewolf living among them. They then gathered together to discuss what to do, and a group of brave hunters decide to set out tracks and capture this creature once and for all. But the werewolf proves to be a formidable opponent, and the hunters are no match for its strength and speed. As the body count rises, the villagers start to turn on each other, suspecting that one of their own may be the werewolf. The local pastor, known for his wisdom and compassion, tries to keep the peace, but the villagers are too scared and desperate to listen. In the meantime, a young man named Olaf, who has always felt out of place in the village, starts to suspect that he might be the werewolf. And no, we're not talking about the snowman Olaf from Frozen. Anyways, Olaf decides to confide in the pastor, who helps him to discover the truth of his condition, which is that he is not a werewolf. Together, they devise a plan to capture the real werewolf, who is revealed to be a wealthy and influential member of the village who had committed the murders for personal gain. Eventually, the real werewolf was captured, and Olaf was able to live a normal life, and the village was finally at peace. But the experience has left them all changed, and they vowed to never forget the terrifying events of this werewolf. Number 4, Queen Gunhild. Gunhild was a powerful and infamous Viking queen known for her beauty, magic, and cunning personality. According to 12th century historical records, she was a Danish princess, the daughter of King Gorm the Old, who married Eric Bloodaxe, a prince of Norway, in a political alliance. However, the Icelandic sagas, which were written by people who held a grudge against Eric Bloodaxe and Gunhild, give her a different origin. They suggest that she was a daughter of a farmer from Hålogaland in northern Norway, and that she was fostered by 2 Finnish wizards who personally taught her magic. This characterization sets Gunhild up as a sinister character in Icelandic accounts, and as a nemesis for the hero in Egil's saga, who is a master of Viking magic. The sagas describe Gunhild as ambitious and ruthless, willing to do anything to secure her husband's power. She is accused of using her magic to ensure the death of her husband's half-brother and creating more problems between her husband and his other brothers, leading him to kill all 4 of them. After being overthrown and exiled from Norway in 934 AD, Gunhild and her husband sought power in the Orkney Islands and in Jorvik, modern-day York, in England. But her nemesis Egil Skallagrimsson showed up, and the two were involved in a bitter feud filled with more curses and more death. Number 3, Grendel. Grendel is a character in the Anglo-Saxon epic poem Beowulf, which is believed to have been written between 700 to 1000 AD. He is one of the 3 main antagonists in the poem, along with his mother and a dragon, and he is feared by all in the hero wrote except for the protagonist Beowulf. Described as a creature of darkness, exiled from happiness and a curse from God, the destroyer and the devourer of humankind, Grendel is typically depicted as a monster or a giant, and although his true form is not clearly described in the poem and remains a subject of scholarly debate. According to the poem, Grendel is unable to bear the sounds of singing that come every night from the mead hall of Haralot, built by King Hrothgar, and begins attacking the hall every night for 12 years, killing its inhabitants and making the hall unusable. Beowulf hears of these attacks and leaves his native land of Geats to destroy Grendel. After a fierce battle, Beowulf tears off Grendel's arms, mortally wounding the creature, and Grendel dies in the marsh den. Number 2, Jormungand. The Jormungand, also known as the Midgard Serpent, is a giant snake or dragon who lives in the ocean surrounding Midgard, the visible world. His body is so large that it forms a circle around the entire world. He is one of the 3 children of Loki and the giantess Angerboda, along with Hel and Fenrir. Thor, the god of thunder, is his mortal enemy, and the two have had battles recorded in Norse mythology. In one of the battles, Thor tries to catch Jormungand with a fishing line, but fails as a giant Ymir, fearing that it would lead to the end of the world, cuts the line and sends the snake back to the depths. It is said that during the final battle of Ragnarok, Thor and Jormungand will slay one another. The serpent is also said to have been part of the religion of the ancient Germanic tribes, as indicated by its presence in the late pre-Christian religions of the Germanic people. Even in the Middle Ages, Vikings believed that earthquakes were caused by the serpent's movements. I mean, do I have to say more? It's literally a giant snake. What could be worse than that? Number 1, the Fenrir wolf. If you have ever watched Thor Ragnarok, then you definitely saw this gigantic wolf, Fenrir. Fenrir is a giant wolf in Norse mythology and is one of the children of Loki and Angerboda. He has 2 siblings, Hel and Jormungandr. The wolf is known for his strength and his role in the events leading up to Ragnarok. He is foretold to kill Odin during the events of Ragnarok, but will in turn be killed by Odin's son Vilgar. The gods bound him due to the prophecy of his rapid growth and the trouble he would bring, and as a result, he bit off the right hand of the god Tyr. Depictions of Fenrir have been identified on various objects, and he appears in literature. He's forever growing and most chains cannot hold him. He was also invited to Asgard and was chained there multiple times, but eventually managed to break them off with a simple shake. In the end, the gods went to the dwarves for their help, who made a special rope called Gleipnir to finally bind him. He will remain bound until Ragnarok, where Skoll will kill the sun goddess, and Hati will kill the moon god, and Fenrir himself will battle Odin and devour him, but will be killed by his son. Coming in at our number 10 spot, we have the mutated pig. Spider pig, anyone? No? No? Okay. What you are seeing is a mutated piglet that was born near the site of the original explosion. This piglet suffered from dipigus, which is a congenital deformity where the body axis forks left and right part way along the torso, with the posterior end, which is the pelvis and legs, duplicated. And if you double back on this photo, it kind of looks straight out of a scene from a horror movie. Kind of like The Thing. At a number 9 spot, we have radioactive spiders. Spiders have been the subject of many people's fears for many years, but recent developments in Chernobyl have added a whole new layer of terror to their existence. These spiders are living in the exclusion zone, which is the area surrounding the site of the infamous nuclear disaster. The spiders that inhabit this area are not only radioactives themselves, but also began to spin webs that are radioactive too. This development is straight out of a comic book. The radioactive spiders and their webs are dangerous to other animals that are not radioactive. This means that non-radioactive animals that come into contact with them could suffer from radiation poisoning. Even humans who venture into the exclusion zone need to be careful, as they could easily walk into these webs and be exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. These spiders have also developed new ways of weaving their webs, which suggests that they have undergone some sort of genetic mutation due to the radiation. This mutation could have significant implications for the ecosystem of this exclusion zone and also beyond. And it's just crazy to think that just by walking through a cobweb, it could make you suffer from radiation poisoning. Crazy. At a number 8 spot, we have the Blackbird of Chernobyl. In the days leading up to the Chernobyl disaster, several workers in the control room of the nuclear power plant claimed to have seen a terrifying creature in the sky. The creature was described as a hideous humanoid with giant wings, a black headless body, and red glowing eyes. It was said to be a bringer of doom, sending a message of imminent disaster to all who gazed upon it. Ever since, it's been known as the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Sydney archaeologist Robert Maxwell claims that the legend of the Blackbird is more than just a spooky story. Maxwell is the only archaeologist to have ever worked at Chernobyl, completing 2 field excursions at the exclusion zone both in 2010 and 2012. He is very passionate about the place in both a historical and archaeological sense, and there's little he doesn't know about Chernobyl on matters of both physical and supernatural. Maxwell told news.com.au that the legend of the Blackbird of Chernobyl was something he had heard about when he was in the exclusion zone. He said that the legend states that in the days leading up to the disaster, a supernatural creature was sighted in the sky over Chernobyl by many of the men in the control room. They also claimed to have seen this terrifying creature just before the explosion. This is what made many believe this mutated bird or man was a messenger of danger. So basically, if you see it, something bad is bound to happen. Kind of like the Mothman. At a number 7 spot, we have the cows. Around the area of Chernobyl, agriculture was once a primary source of income before the disaster. And after the disaster, these animals were exposed to high levels of radiation. More specifically, the cows. Many farmers took their cows with them when they evacuated the area, but the radiation had already affected them. The newer generation saw much more of the effects of radiation. In 1989, farmers began reporting birth defects in their animals, and as time went on, the cows became less mutated. However, the effects did not go away completely. Cows began to graze on contaminated feed, leading to more internal effects. Even completely normal looking cows near the exclusion zone started producing milk that was both toxic and unfit for consumption. This is just one of the clear examples of how, even though the visible effects of radiation exposure may have worn off, there are still lasting effects that we had not previously considered. And to make matters worse, this didn't only affect the surrounding area. The Mexican government stated in January 1988 that they destroyed 41 tons of imported powdered milk because it was reportedly contaminated with radiation from the nuclear disaster. More specifically, the milk is contaminated with cesium-137 and strontium-90, which cause a syndrome that destroys cell membranes. And all I can say is, I'll be taking a small hiatus off milk for a bit. At a number 6 spot, we have chickens. Scientists have reported the presence of mutated chickens with deformed beaks and an extra set of legs in areas surrounding the nuclear power plant. These chickens almost look unreal and doesn't resemble their species at all. Experts believe that the mutations in chickens are a result of radiation exposure, with the birds being particularly susceptible to genetic damage due to their fast reproductive cycle. It is advised as well that humans should avoid consuming these chickens as they may cause health issues. I thought that was a given. Although these deformities may seem alarming, it's important to note that not all mutations are harmful, and some may even be advantageous in certain environments. In the Humperer list, we have wild boars. 30 years after the nuclear disaster, radiation is still causing so many concerns in unexpected places. One such place is the mountains of Czech Republic, where wild boars are becoming eradicated from eating wild mushrooms during the winter months. The radioactive metal cesium-137 was spewed in the atmosphere during the 1986 disaster and was blown flown almost 1,000 miles away to the Czech Republic. Mushrooms in the region absorb this radiation, and when wild boars consume them, the radiation travels up the food chain. The contaminated boars are not safe for human consumption, which is a problem in a country where boar meat is commonly used in stews and goulash. Cesium-137 is not safe for human consumption as it spreads radioactive atoms throughout the body, increasing the risk of cancer. While a low dose of Cesium-137 is unlikely to cause harm, consuming it multiple times a week for several months may lead to some health issues. Food inspectors in the Czech Republic screen wild meat before it goes to the market, and from 2014 to 2016, almost half of the 614 pigs inspected were too radioactive to eat. But if you visit the Czech Republic now and consume wild boar, you should be safe, as hazardous meat is banned from use. It is essential to note that the contamination is not turning the boars into mutant animals, but it is a warning sign that radiation from the Chernobyl disaster continues to have consequences more than 3 decades later. At our number 4 spot, we have firebugs. In 2011, 2 friends stumbled upon a group of tiny but deadly creatures while out collecting flowers in the exclusion zone. These creatures, known as firebugs, are radioactive and were discovered by the friends for scientific reasons, which is to study the pollen, not to create a deadly radioactive bouquet of flowers. The friends collected hundreds of these bugs, some from areas with higher levels of radiation and some from areas with lower levels of radiation. Through their research, they found that the bugs exposed to higher levels of radiation had deformities, confirming suspicions about the negative effects of radiation on living creatures. Although these creatures may seem harmless at first, their radioactive properties make them a danger to humans. You wouldn't want these guys crawling on your skin for a number of reasons. And with their small size and deadly nature, it's really easy to see why these firebugs are a cause for concern in the Chernobyl area. And it just shows that you can't even collect flowers in this place. So best believe, avoid it completely. Number 3, the barn shallot. In the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, not only were humans affected, but the entire ecosystem was thrown into chaos. Animals who lived in the exclusion zone, including those who spend most of their time in the sky, were exposed to the effects of radiation. Among those affected animals are the barn swallows, whose physical appearance has been altered by the disaster. The barn swallows of Chernobyl have suffered from severe deformities that have persisted throughout the years since the nuclear meltdown. These birds have been affected more than their land animal counterparts, and it's still unclear why. It is also uncertain if these changes will reverse back to their previous state. Currently, the swallows have severely deformed beaks, disproportionate feathers, partial albinism, and smaller brains. While some of these issues are more severe than others, they undoubtedly have a significant impact on the swallow's way of life. Despite these obstacles, the barn swallows continue to adapt as time goes by. Number 2, the Przewalski's horse. The Przewalski's horse is a wild horse originating from Mongolia and was once on the brinks of extinction due to hunting and difficulties in reproduction in captivity. Harsh winters in their natural habitat didn't make things easier for the species as well. But in the late 1990s, hope was restored for the Przewalski's horse when a group of 30 horses were released into the Ukrainian side of the exclusion zone. Amazingly, some of the original horses are still alive to this day, and camera trap images have shown young horses as well. This is a huge win for the species, as their expanding population in such a harsh environment means that they might potentially be able to return from the brink and continue as a species. Some Przewalski horses have significant deformities, but this doesn't change the fact that they're an excellent example of how successful conservation efforts can help repopulate endangered species. Number 1, the European grey wolves. In the aftermath of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the exclusion zone surrounding the site of the accident was evacuated by humans, leaving the wildlife to thrive in radioactive environments. While some species have struggled to adapt to the aftermath of the disaster, others, such as the European grey wolf, have been thriving in this unusual environment. Despite the high levels of radiation, the grey wolf population has been able to grow, with the population of the area being 7 times higher than in comparable sites. Researchers are also still trying to figure out why this is happening, but it is clear that radiation is not affecting the wildlife's ability to reproduce, but it is causing deformities in some. As their population grows, they're beginning to travel farther and spread out, which is creating a new set of challenges, and coming into contact with radioactive wolves could result in a high dose of radiation, which is not recommended. Touching a carcass of these wolves is also really bad, because if you do touch them with your bare hands, you'll probably get radiation poisoning. Number 10, the Black Volga. The Black Volga is an urban legend that has captivated audiences for decades. The legend refers to a mysterious black or red GA721 or GA724 car that was allegedly used to abduct and murder people in the 1960s and 70s in countries like Poland, Romania, Hungary, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Greece, and Mongolia. The car is described as having white wheel rims, white curtains, or other white elements, which only adds to its eerie appearance. According to different versions of the legend, the car was driven by various nefarious characters. These included communist secret police, Russian mafia, and Satanists. And then there are some who say Satan himself drove it. The motives for the abductions and murders vary as well, with some versions stating that the victims were kidnapped and murdered for their blood, which was supposedly used as a cure for rich Westerners or Arabs suffering from leukemia. The legend of the Black Volga has become so ingrained in popular culture that it has spawned variations such as the car having horns instead of wing mirrors, the number 666 on the license plate, and even the driver asking for the time and killing the person who approaches the car to answer this question. But luckily, there's also an effective defense method for this. So they say whenever the driver of the Volga asks, "What time is it?" you should just answer, "It's God's time." Then the car would just quickly vanish. Number 9, the Felixstowe Fire Demon. The Felixstowe Fire Demon sighting was an extraterrestrial sighting that took place in Felixstowe, England in 1965. The group that saw it consisted of the driver, 25-year-old Jeffrey Maskey, and his passengers, Mavis Fordyce and Michael Johnson. They were driving along an isolated tree-lined avenue when they decided to pull over to preserve gas. As they engaged in conversation, Johnson suddenly opened the car door and walked out into the murky night. Fordyce and Maskey exchanged perplexed glances as their companion vanished into the darkness, but simply assumed he had gone to use the bathroom in the woods. Just moments after Johnson disappeared, Fordyce and Maskey heard a strange high-pitched humming sound. Fordyce grew anxious as the disconcerting sound became louder, and Maskey leaned out the window to try and find the origin of the noise. It was then that he saw an oval-shaped orange object suspended in the sky above his car. Maskey estimated that the UFO was about 6 foot wide, and both he and Fordyce claimed that it was glowing so brightly that it glowed the surrounding countryside in an eerie orange glow. The following day, Johnson recovered his senses and told his friends and doctors of his harrowing encounter with an alien entity in the woods. He claimed that when he abruptly got out of the car the night before, he was compelled to do so by an unknown force, which insisted that he go into the woods. Johnson walked into the dark forest where he encountered a humanoid being with large sloping eyes that were glowing in the darkness. He also claimed that the creature was engulfed by an orange flame, and it was at that point that he just blacked out. Number 8, the Blood Countess. Dubbed the most prolific female murderer by Guinness World Records, Countess Elizabeth Bathory was infamous for her dark, gruesome truth. Born into a noble Hungarian family in 1560 or 1561, they don't really know the date, Bathory descended from multiple noble lineages and included the King of Poland and the Prince of Transylvania among her relatives. It is thought that her parents were both close relatives, and that this may have been the source of a number of health problems that she experienced as a child, such as severe epileptic seizures. After she got married at 15 years old with Ferenc Nadasti, rumors began to circulate about her atrocities. Between 1602 and 1604, the rumors about Bathory's crimes became impossible for the authorities to ignore. Lutheran minister Istvan Magyari made complaints about her both publicly and at the court in Vienna, but it took until 1610 for King Matthias II to assign 2 notaries, Andras Korestori and Moses Reiki, to collect evidence on the charges made against her. The evidence that was collected revealed that the girls as young as 10 were being abducted by Bathory, beaten severely, and mutilated before freezing or starving to death. Some girls were allegedly burned with hot tongs, and others had parts of their face bitten off. As a result, Bathory was arrested and imprisoned for life, where she died 4 years later. The true story of Bathory is a complex and disturbing tale of a woman who committed horrific crimes against innocent girls. And while the vampire and blood-bathing legends may make for a sensational story, the truth is terrifying on its own. Number 7, the Black Monk of Pontefract. The Black Monk of Pontefract is a legend that has been passed down through history, detailing a supposed poltergeist haunting that took place in the late 1960s and early 70s in a home in the town of Pontefract, England. The home belonged to a family by the name of Pritchard, who claimed to have experienced a series of terrifying and inexplicable disturbances from the moment they moved in. The disturbances began with small occurrences such as a gust of cold wind and a strange white powder falling from the air. However, as time went on, the disturbances became increasingly intense and more terrifying. Puddles of water began appearing on the kitchen floor, and even a plumber was unable to offer an explanation for this. The family reported hearing loud crashing sounds and seeing objects move or disappear, and they even claimed that a heavy chest of drawers began to sway on its own. The disturbances were so intense that at one point, the family was forced to flee the home and sleep at a neighbor's house out of fear alone. Even when they returned, the disturbances continued, with the family's daughter Diane being thrown from her bed and dragged up the stairs by an invisible force. The family even claimed that after they sprinkled holy water across the home, the poltergeist responded by painting upside down crosses on the living room walls and doors and destroying crucifixes wherever they were. The Pritchards also claimed that a black cloaked figure with a cowl over its head appeared over their bed, and they attributed this to the poltergeist, but it is not confirmed. Number 6, the Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack is a legendary figure from Victorian England who is said to be a fire-breathing devil man who could jump unnaturally high. The legend of Spring-Heeled Jack first started to appear in 1837, where residents of a London neighborhood began to report bizarre attacks from a figure described as a ghost, imp, or devil in the shape of a large white bull. The figure mainly targeted women, ringing their doorbells, and when they answered, it would ravage their clothes with its claws. Other sightings have him simply ambushing people who were out walking. The figure was also described as wearing red shoes or armor, and despite the skepticism from the press, the legend of the Spring-Heeled Jack continued to grow. It grew so much that the Lord Mayor of London even addressed the growing number of stories, bringing up the theory that the attacks were perpetuated by a group of wealthy individuals. Some believe that it was a group of wealthy men dressing up and scaring people on a bet. However, the true nature of Spring-Heeled Jack still remains a mystery, and as of today, there is no evidence of what this person may have been. In the hump of our list, we're the Beast of Gévaudan. In the 1760s, a terrifying creature known as the Beast began killing nearly 300 people in a remote region of south-central France called the Gévaudan. The Beast was thought to be a huge animal, but its reputation grew to be much more sinister. Reports stated that it preferred attacking women and children, and that it would remove the victim's head and drink all of their blood, leaving nothing behind but a pile of bones. Illustrators had a field day representing the Beast, with many emphasizing its goriness and preference for found victims. The attacks in Gévaudan created widespread fear, to the point that King Louis intervened, offering a reward for its capture. Despite the efforts of hunters, a dragoon captain, and even professional wolf stalkers, the Beast was not captured until September 1765 by Francois Antoine. And even then, the attacks continued. Supernatural explanations of the attack continued to circulate, with some believing it to be the work of werewolves, but most historians now agree that the Gévaudan Beast was most likely a pack of large wolves. The legend of the Beast still holds a certain level of creep factor, making it a truly terrifying urban legend from France. Number 4, the Caves of Death. I mean, the name says it all, but if you happen to be in Scotland and want to try something daring, then maybe go try out the Caves of Death. Archaeologists discovered this not too long ago and found that this was an ancient location used for human sacrifice, execution, and body disposal. So pretty much a good place all in all. Radiocarbon dating found masses of dismembered body parts, including children's head left on poles in front of the cave's entrance, which were left there 3,200 years ago. It's said that they did this because they treated this place as a shrine where they would leave those who passed away, wait for them to decompose, then collect the bones. Number 3, the Queen of Spades. Basically the Russian version of Bloody Mary. This supernatural being is said to grant wishes to anyone who suffers her, but at a price, of course. As the Joker once said, if you're good at something, never do it for free. To summon her, similar to Bloody Mary, you need to go in a dark room with a mirror and light a candle in front of it. Once you have that set up, you need to place a Queen of Hearts playing card right up against the mirror. You now need to draw a door with some stairs on the mirror. Now in the front of the mirror, you need to clear your mind and close your eyes and say Queen of Spades 3 times. While you're saying your name, visualize the queen opening the door and walking down the stairs from the lipstick drawing. This part is where many people report hearing evil laughter just before they encounter the Queen of Spades. Once she appears, you need to hold your candle and say your wish out loud. Once you're done, blow out your candle. Because if you don't, her spirit may come out through the window and stay in our world. Basically, chanting a name in a mirror doesn't have good implications in any culture. Number 2, the Chernobyl Black Bird. Just a few days before the infamous Chernobyl nuclear plant disaster, many workers at the plant reported seeing a large, dark, and mutated man with gigantic wings. This humanoid creature was given the name Black Bird of Chernobyl, and despite the fact that it had no head, it had piercing red eyes that would send chills to the spine of anyone caught looking. Before the nuclear disaster, workers claimed to have been plagued by terrifying dreams and many instances of bad luck. Fast forward to the day of the disaster, and now workers have reported seeing a large black bird-like creature with a 40-foot wingspan flying through the smoke of Chernobyl. Many people believe these creatures to be a bad omen since they are shown around history to appear before tragic events. Now this creature is nowhere to be found in the area, which makes many wondering what was truly haunting them at this famous nuclear plant. Number 1. The London Fog. On December 4th, 1952, smog began to cover all of London. The smog was present for 5 whole days and ended up leading to the passing of at least 4,000 people. On a regular Tuesday afternoon, a high-pressure air mass stalled over Thames River Valley. Suddenly, cold air came in from the west side and the air in London became trapped. The problem worsened by the low temperatures, which caused people living there to burn extra coal in their surfaces to keep warm. The smoke, soot, and sulfur dioxide from the area's industries, along with the stuff from cars and consumer energy usage, caused heavy smog to smother the entire city. By the morning of December 5th, it was visible across hundreds of square miles. It became so thick and dense that by December 7th, there was no sunlight, and visibility was down to only 5 yards in many places. Eventually, all transportation came to a halt, but not before the smog caused several train accidents, including a collision between 2 trains near the London Bridge. However, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst effect of the smog was the respiratory distress it caused in us humans and animals, including difficulty breathing and many people vomiting. A high number of people in the area, numbering in the thousands, passed away in their sleep that weekend alone. Now, it's a little crazy to me that all this happened and so many people ended up losing their lives, but I guess you can't really control Mother Nature when it comes down to stuff like this.